wishing each one of you a very, very happy Independence Day from all of us right here at ET Now. This is India at 70, and as we celebrate our 71st Independence Day, what are the opportunities and challenges that really lie ahead?
Takeaways from the Prime Minister's speech from the ramparts of the Red Fort this morning. For corporate India in particular, when the Prime Minister said that good governance needs to be a fundamental right, is that even possible in a country like India? That's what we're going to debate and discuss with a very special panel joining us on the show today as we mark our 71st Independence Day. We've got Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw of Biocon, R.C. Bhargav of Maruti. Will be joined in moments from now by Shobna Kaminini, the president of CII, and Maithili Bushnurmat, consulting editor, ET Now, joins in as well on the show. Thank you so much, all of you, for being with us here at ET Now. Kiran, I'm going to start with you. What was your key takeaway from corporate India's point of view from that speech of the Prime Minister? He kept it short. He promised that he'd keep it short at his Mann Ki Baat address a week or so ago. But what was your key takeaway, Kiran?
Very important and positive takeaways for me. One was that he was going to focus on, the whole aspect of enabling India Inc. through the ease of doing business, but at the same time making sure that he focused on, doing away with corruption and black money. And I think GST was a big statement that he made, and I'm glad that the Prime Minister said that the GST was not an optimal GST at this point in time, but he was very committed to reforming the GST as fast as possible to make it business friendly and business enabling. I think he focused a lot on unleashing the entrepreneurial energy of the youth to create jobs rather than seeking jobs. I think he focused a lot on technology and the importance of digital technologies for inclusive economic development. And I think if you look at all these important statements that he has made, I think it does indicate that these are the key achievements of this government. Demonetization that basically dealt a very swift blow to black money. The GST, which has really made sure that the whole tax structure of this country is harmonized, and he has also brought a large number of businesses into the tax net, and he has also made a lot of progress in dealing with defaulters and also dealing with these shell companies. So I think his message is very clear. We have to deal with corruption in a big way. And I must say this government has done a lot to deal with those issues. If there are a few shortcomings that I would like to sort of point to, I really am very concerned at the low levels of investment in science and technology, healthcare and education. And I think this is where I would like the government to really come out with proactive and pragmatic policies. Because if we talk about innovation, then without investing big time in science and technology, we will not be able to really realize this opportunity ahead. I think healthcare, we've seen that there needs to be a very strong effort to beef up and reform our healthcare system. We need to beef up not only the investment, but the upgradation of our health delivery systems. The Gorakhpur tragedy itself has shown up the administrative, problems that we have in healthcare delivery. And I think there is corruption down the line which we have to deal with. So whilst corruption at the top has completely stopped, and I think that's a great positive sign, because it has dealt with crony capitalism in a very effective way, I'm really concerned about the slow trickle-down effect that it is having at the lower levels. Education is definitely going to be a big determiner of jobs for the future. If we do not improve the quality of our education, if we do not improve the quality of our health systems, I don't think we will have a nation that can do what it is supposed to do and what it can do.
No, I think I agree with you more than I would disagree at any point in time, Kiran. I think you've raised some very important points, and I'm going to come back and touch upon some of those points. Education, healthcare, elimination of corruption. I'm going to touch upon all of that in just a bit, but I do want to get opening comments from Maithili as well. And Maithili, this is an Independence Day speech unlike the previous ones that he has made. There were, big slogans released in the previous ones, whether it was Make in India or Start Up and Stand Up India. That kind of sloganeering was missing. So there wasn't a big idea that one could go back with. But do you believe that's on account of the fact that the government perhaps is in execution mode, 3 years in office, 2 more to go? There is more execution now than rhetoric that we've seen in the past, the big bang slogans.
Supriya, listening to the Prime Minister this morning, what struck me was that he seems to be kicking off the campaign for the next general election in 2019. Because while he has listed out all the achievements of the government, and of course he did tom-tom about the achievements, which are not insignificant, one must concede, he was also setting out a vision, but a vision of a new India for 2022. So the appeal seemed to be a fervent plea that vote us back into power in 2019 and we will give you a new India, a vision of a new India with water, electricity, a home for every Indian and healthcare, etc., but in 2022. To my mind, this sounded very much as if he was starting the election campaign for 2019, which also explains his much more conciliatory approach, the idea that there must not be violence in the name of any faith, and also the softer tone that he adopted towards J&K, saying that we must solve it in a spirit of brotherhood, etc. So for me, what struck me most of all is that he's striking a much more softer, conciliatory note, listing out the achievements, telling the people this is all that we have done, and mind you, we will give you a new India, set out the vision of a new India, but by 2022, after the 2019 election. So the unstated comment seemed to be that vote us back into power in 2019 and we will give you this new India, but in 2022.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to take this across to the CII President Shobhana Kamineni, who is also joining us right here on ET Now, and thank you very much for being with us. Wish you a happy Independence Day. The opening comments from Kiran Majumdar show is that yes, the government has done a lot, but a lot of that needs to trickle down. Education, healthcare, or other things. Ms. Kamineni, can you hear me there? I don't think she can hear me right now. Okay, I think we've lost her feed. Do we have Mr. Bhargav to go to? Unless I'll go back to Kiran and talk about. Okay, Kiran, I'm going to come back to the big point that you made, that, education or healthcare and corruption. Let's talk about corruption. That's the big elephant in the room. And I think the Prime Minister's speech was about a cleaner India. He's talking about Vision 2022 and he's talking about a crackdown on black money. Have you seen that happen? Yes, at the top of the echelon, that has happened. But has it trickled down to the bottom? And what is it going to take for the government in the next 2 years that it's in office and for its Vision 2022 to really crack down on corruption that is so deep-seated? And I'm sure it impacts businesses like yourselves.
So let me start by saying I think this government has done a lot to clean up the system at the top. And I think you have to give it a lot of credit for that, because they have very boldly dealt with crony capitalism. I think they have dealt with it in a way that was long overdue. I think, dealing with these big ticket defaulters, dealing with, the other aspects of black money and, the shell companies, I think they've done a lot. And I think, getting people to, adopt, getting the parliament to adopt the bankruptcy law, getting defaulters to file for bankruptcy, I think all these are really great achievements. The trickle-down effect is going to take time, but I am very confident that, with greater transparency and online regulatory norms and regulatory mechanisms, you can see a faster trickle-down effect. Right now, because we don't use technology enough and digital online platforms enough, there is a lot of scope for corruption. But as you use technology and digital technologies, you are going to see a very strong trickle-down effect.
Right. Maitri, the point on crackdown on corruption, I think he said that in the context of demonetization as well, made a strong reason on how demonetization has yielded results. The jury is still out really on the demo verdict, Maitri, and you've been critical of it as well. How do you read his comments on demonetization? The fact that it has helped bring rates down was his pitch. He was trying to hard sell what was a painful reform move for the common man. How do you read his comments on demonetization at the Independence Day speech today?
Well, I think demonetization has given political dividends to the government, certainly if you go by the UP elections results. But on the economic front, I think we have needlessly, shot ourselves in the foot, as it were, for the simple reason the slowdown in the economy, even though, yes, most economists say that the slowdown had begun before demonetization. Demonetization certainly aggravated the slowdown by suddenly removing as much as 86% of the currency by value. And since the informal sector, the unorganized sector, was almost entirely cash driven, there was a huge amount of suffering, not only in terms of human suffering, but also in terms of output and economic activity that was lost. The benefits, in terms of sheer economic benefits, I think virtually none, because the government was hoping that you would get a windfall profit from the RBI's profit and loss, because there would be a fairly substantial amount of notes that would not be surrendered. The RBI has been amazingly coy about declaring how much has been surrendered. They say we're still counting, which I find very hard to believe in today's day of technology. So my sense is that the windfall profit most certainly is not there. On the contrary, we've seen RBI's profit, the dividend to the government, come down by less than half. So the economic cost of demonetization has been very substantial. Has this cleaned up the system? I have my doubts, for the simple reason that demonetization is only one of a number of measures that you need to take to clean up the system. All you've really addressed was basically the stock of black money in the form of cash, not the stock of black money in other forms, not the flow of black money. But in fairness to the Prime Minister, he has spoken about improving governance, and he says along with transparency and greater simplicity, we will have improved governance. And if that happens, hopefully the flow of black money will also come down, if not cease entirely. At the same time, the large-scale cleanup that we're seeing in the corporate sector, particularly after the SEBI crackdown on shell companies, the kind of defaulters that we are trying to see being brought to book. So I think these measures will all help. But these are all works in progress. We cannot expect miracles overnight. There will be some pain, as in the case of GST we're seeing. There is a short-term pain.
All right, let's get in the view from CII. Shobna Kamini joins in as well. Shobna, how did you read the Prime Minister's comments on demonetization? Like we've been saying, the jury is still out, and there's been a fair amount of pain that corporate India has had to feel as well on account of demonetization. Now with the RBI actually giving a dividend that's less than half of what it gave last year, there are serious talks on the fiscal implication of this move as well, whether we'll meet our fiscal targets as well. So there is an overall concern on the broader economic impact of the demonetization drive, even though the Prime Minister did hard sell the reform in his speech this morning.
So first, I think that we need to celebrate a number of things, that we have a secure, prosperous and a capable nation, and that was the primary messaging of the Prime Minister, and today is a day to celebrate freedoms. So when it comes to things like demonetization, I think that it was a measure that was tried with all sincerity, that it pushed the envelope. It was big and bold, and we're still recovering from it. And we're seeing actually a number of things that were tough for the economy, no doubt about it, but there were actually some things that were positive. One pushed us into a digital age faster than anything else could have. You're seeing a lot more bank accounts that have come out, so there's parity in that process. And yes, I don't think that the RBI's dividend and all this is under stress just because of demonetization. There are a whole bunch of other problems in there. The NPA issue that needs to get resolved. Also the fact that there's so many farmers' loans that are sitting there. So I think that we have to look at this collectively. And when we're thinking about prosperity, moving forward in our 70th year, I like the fact that the Prime Minister was actually messaging about India at 75. That's something CII also did in 2008. So quite courageous of him.
Okay, courageous of him to talk about India at 75, even as we celebrate our 71st Independence Day. But R.C. Bhargav, I'm going to ask you the question that perhaps is the big theme of his speech this year, which is governance. And he says governance should be a fundamental right. Is that ever going to be possible in India? Is question number one. And may I also ask you, has the government in some sense not lived up to its poll promise of minimum government, maximum governance? We're seeing a lot of government just about everywhere right now.
You know, India has been a country which has always had almost all activities controlled by the government. Right from the beginning, when we started our 5-year plans, the government took over virtually all aspects of the economy. Over these years, people have got used to looking to government for every little bit of action which they need on anything. The habit of people becoming self-reliant, doing things on your own, not relying on government is just not there. And while the principle of maximum governance, minimum government is very good, but it'll take time to come. And the other aspect is that you cannot have good governance in a country where over the decades we have got a system which has corrupted a lot of institutions, a lot of people all over the place, especially in the government structure. I'm talking of what happens when you have massive non-compliance with tax laws, as a result of which generation of black money. Generation of black money means using it to corrupt all kinds of agencies which are involved or should have been involved in ensuring good governance of the industrial working, the tax system working. All of that doesn't happen. So how, to expect a change suddenly to happen is not possible. I think we see a number of measures which the government has taken, and they have to be looked at as a part of a total mosaic which is driving us towards compliance. The demonetization, sure, it had a cost, but what was the cost we were paying by rapidly growing our black money economy, and nobody was doing anything about it for decades. Nobody talked about the cost of a black money economy. Nobody talked about the cost of non-compliance. Now, if you don't talk about those things, and then suddenly when somebody is trying to make the economy compliant, make people compliant, you start complaining about the cost, I think that's a very wrong judgment on what's really happening.
Okay, wrong judgment of what is really happening. But Shobhana Kamineni, I'm going to stick with governance, because governance is a fundamental right according to the Prime Minister and should be given to the people. I'm wondering if it is in fact going to be true in India at all. What is your view? What is the CII and your own view on this? Can governance be a fundamental right? And Mr. Bhargav is right. The government is present in way too many things in India. Can it realistically get out of those things?
So I think they're trying. You know, if you look at states moving towards ease of doing business, they've clearly understood industry is not going to tolerate a whole bunch of bureaucratic processes. And even if you talk about, you know, corruption at some level, I think that when Prime Minister spoke about that we have to get rid of our chalta hai attitude, it also has to come from all of us. And I think that the states that are getting the better projects, that you're seeing progress happen, are states that have understood this. And this will come, so it's not going to be an overnight, it's not going to be a movement, but I think that it'll probably take, it's a generational change, because I mean, face it, 70 years we've had a system that just piled one on top of another, and you just can't wipe it out overnight. This is a process, and one is that industry is hopeful. But from our side, I think that what we've been talking about actually is about volunteerism. I think that now every citizen, that whether it's industry through its CSR, but just people out there and more volunteering needs to go on to show the country we care. It just doesn't stop, you know, with sitting here and criticizing or praising. I think that we have to step up. Governance a fundamental right. Kiran, I'm sure you of all people would definitely welcome that you've
You've spoken and written a lot about governance in specific issues, but specifically to healthcare and technology, science and technology that you spoke about earlier as well. How can governance improve? Because what we're talking about is actually a tectonic shift in the nature of governance. On the one hand, you need light touch regulation in some sectors, and on some sectors probably you need a little more focused governance. Healthcare, for example, in light of, for example, the Gorakhpur tragedy as well now, there's a crying need for reforms in a sector like healthcare.
So I think, in some areas, healthcare is being over-governed.
Kiran first, and then I'll come to you on the same question. If you could just get a word from Kiran, and then I'm coming to you as well. Kiran.
No, I said that, e-governance is a very important starting point for starting with good governance. And I think the more you have online transparency, I think you're likely to see, less avenues for corruption. So I just think you need to create a governance structure that uses technology, that uses online transparency. And I believe that is going to be really, or that should be the focus of the government. Whether it is healthcare, whether it is any kind of administrative or regulatory kind of need, I think this is what is going to happen. I mean, I've seen it even in healthcare. I think, digital healthcare, e-healthcare is definitely the way to make sure that healthcare is delivered to the patient at the patient level. Today, there is no transparency. For instance, if you look at what happened in Gorakhpur, I think there was no sense of accountability, there was no evidence to show what is right and what is wrong. I think you need to have data, and unless you have data-driven accountability and reliable data-driven accountability, which can only happen through e-governance and digital technologies, you will not see the needle move in terms of being able to have this trickle-down effect on corruption.
Shobna, you represent the healthcare industry as well, and earlier Kiran made this point of saying that there are a lot of good things in the speech, but the fact that there wasn't a mention for the healthcare sector, especially in light of events of late, is that a disappointment for you as well, that we haven't seen a greater thrust on the healthcare sector specifically as far as policy making is concerned?
So I agree with everything that Kiran said actually, in terms of that you need data and then you need to drive governance from there, especially in healthcare. But one thing is that we should understand that, not confuse the fact that the governance should be in terms of quality standards. But now we're finding governments actually saying that price caps and then this is all that you can charge in different states. I think these two have to be separated for healthcare, because there's a vast spectrum. We need to make sure that universal healthcare is a fundamental right. And the Prime Minister he might not have messaged it today, but he's continuously said that. And that's one aspect. But I do think that India is a place that has demonstrated it has the best quality also of healthcare. So how can we make this and make sure we continue to push the envelope on quality healthcare? So those are two different things. With regard to what's happening in terms of Gorakhpur, it's a very, very sad incident, and I think that this will come from better regulation, better accountability.
Fair point indeed. Let's talk about the other bit. I mean, yes, we've spoken about governance and we've spoken about healthcare perhaps not getting enough importance and how Gorakhpur has perhaps shaken the conscience of this country. But let's take this across to R.C. Bhargav. And Mr. Bhargav, the Prime Minister did mention the other big reform in his tenure, and that is the GST. There's no disputing that it's a tectonic shift in India's not just tax legislation but otherwise as well. The government and the Prime Minister today made us believe that there has been a very smooth transition. We've made a very, very tectonic shift and it has been smooth. I'm just asking you, as somebody who's got his skin in the game on the GST, has the transition been that smooth? Will you give the government the credit that there was preparedness, or is there a different story to tell about things on the ground?
No, as far as the bigger industries are concerned, I have no doubt that it's been a very smooth transition. I think the organization of the whole official machinery for GST is very good. People are well equipped. They're doing a lot of work to educate people on how GST should be done. But nevertheless, I think you have to view this in the context again of what I said about making a compliant society. GST is going to bring about compliance. But there are a whole lot of business establishments in India, a lot of retailers, a lot of small and medium industries who have been largely non-compliant over all these years. They are going to have a lot of pain adjusting to the GST. It's not that the machinery is not smooth or that they can't switch over to the GST system. It's that their own working styles is going to cause them a lot of pain. I think it's going to affect the way business happens in the next couple of quarters while these people adjust. But again, as I said, this is part of the pain which has to be endured if we are going to move towards a much more compliant society.
Okay, it's part of the pain if we have to move to a more tax-compliant society and a tax-compliant economy. Shobhana Kamineni, you represent the biggest names of Indian industry via CII here. Do you agree with that view that this is just pain in transition? Okay, I think we've lost Shobhana Kamineni there, but let's take this across to Maithili. And Maithili, I know nobody will dispute that GST is a game-changing reform spearheaded by this government. But if I may ask you, will you agree with Mr. Bhargav that this is pain in transition as we move from one system onto the other? Or do you believe there's a very disruptive story to tell on the ground?
Supriya, before I answer your question on GST, I'd just like to touch upon the earlier question that you spoke about accountability, governance, as well as whether it's possible to make it a fundamental right. Now, the problem is that something like governance is too wide a term. You can't really define it. So one can never make it a fundamental right. But how can we improve governance even within the country? As you can see, there are different states which have very different levels of governance. Even in the matter of healthcare. Now, health, mind you, is a state subject. And there is a state very much in this country, Tamil Nadu, and I do not belong to Tamil Nadu, let me clarify, where the healthcare standards are almost at par with the best that you can obtain anywhere else, perhaps even in the world. And this has been possible only because you have a population which is fairly educated, fairly demanding of its rights, and a government, despite the corruption that there might be in Tamil Nadu at the top level, which has delivered. So it is possible to improve governance if the government really wishes to do. And healthcare, which is a state subject, Tamil Nadu, as I said, is an outstanding example of what is possible with state intervention, even with the private players. Now, if I can just shift to the area of GST, which is what your question was. Yes, I'd agree entirely with Mr. Bhargav that this is a pain which has to be undergone. The organized sector, the large players will not have a problem because most of them are computerized. But the informal sector and the smaller players are going to find it very difficult. But the government and the tax authorities have done a great deal to try and educate them and prepare them for the kind of changes that would be required. And they have been given a 2-month window because GST kicked in on the 1st of July. But the first returns are expected to be filed only later this month, and by September only will we really start seeing how the GSTN really works. So I am hopeful that despite the short-term pain, this will prove to be a truly momentous change as far as tax is concerned, and will lead to a huge increase in our tax to GDP ratio, which is one of the lowest in the world.
Kiran, I have to get a word in from you on GST as well. 45 days after the rollout of GST, your comments on the 1st of July, which were widely misinterpreted, were probably true on the fact that this is sort of a step ahead, but not as game-changing a reform because of the fact that it's multi-layered. But how do you view the rollout of GST 45 days into this reform?
So I agree with what Mr. Bhargava is saying and what Maithili is saying, that look, I really believe that this is about compliance, and I think we need to have a compliance culture in tax, and I think this is what GST is actually enabling and ensuring, and I think it's absolutely important from that point of view. I think I maintain that it could have been a simpler GST rollout, but having said that, I do realize the complexity of the relationship between the state and the center, and I think it has been admitted that it is a compromise GST which will only improve, and I think the Prime Minister today said it in his Independence Day speech that that the GST is going to undergo a lot of reform so that it becomes really the good and simple tax that he talked about earlier. So I have no doubt about it that GST is a game-changing reform. And it is going to move the economic needle for us, and most of all I am really pleased that it is actually about compliance. It's about tax compliance, and you're already seeing the signs of getting more people into the tax net than before, because whatever said and done, it is forcing people to basically become compliant, and this to me is a very important aspect of GST.
Sure. I want to touch upon one more issue, and this in a sense struck a chord with me, Mr. Bhargav, and I can't think of anyone better than you to take this question. When the Prime Minister spoke about this chalta hai attitude, for far too long it's been the bane of governance in this country. How can we sort of make this transition from having this chalta hai attitude to a badal sakta hai attitude? How can the government make this transition? How can industry make this transition? And how can citizens make this transition?
The problem is that we have to look at different areas of governance. And if you look at things like law enforcement, now law enforcement governance, which affects a lot of people's daily lives, is compromised because of corruption. If you look at the tax administration and how that governance goes, it is compromised by corruption. Sure, e-governance will make some improvements, but I do not believe that e-government by itself can change the whole game and make everybody get excellent governance everywhere, because there's just that much which e-governance can do. There are a whole lot of other things which have to be done by people, and people have to work with the feeling that they are committed to do these things, and they are not going to get saved because they have some links with people through the corruption route higher up who will prevent them. Today, higher officers are not able to influence or discipline people below them because of the direct access which many people below in the law enforcement machinery, the police, the taxation system have with other links, which leads to people being protected. The same thing happens in many other areas of governance. So I still maintain that governance is something which is also linked to our becoming a compliant society, reducing black money, reducing corruption. All of that has to go together. We cannot have areas of excellence when there are whole seas of corruption all around us. So for governance, you have to look at a total picture.
So there can't be pockets of excellence when there's a sea of misgovernance around us. But I think Kiran Majumdar Shaw has a point to make there on the chalta hai attitude, and what will it take to shun that attitude. Kiran?
No, I just wanted to add to what Mr. Bhargava said. I think our justice system has to improve. I think we have a very inefficient and ineffective justice system. So I think law and enforcement and a good justice system that basically delivers justice in a timely way is going to also make a big difference to better governance. Because I really believe that we have all the regulations and all the rules that we need to follow, but as Mr. Bhargava said, there is no enforcement of these rules and regulations. So unless we have a very clear focus on law enforcement and a good justice system that delivers timely and swift justice, I don't think we are going to be able to really see a great improvement in the governance that we want.
Okay, so that's going to take a bit. But Maithili, if I may come to you and give a quick closing comments then. Given the messaging that one has seen, is this a government that's looking at 2019? Is this the government that's out of the rhetoric? What is the big messaging for you from Prime Minister Modi as he spoke from the Red Fort earlier today?
Well, clearly for me it was a political message that he was sending. He was readying the pitch, as it were, for 2019, because he held out this vision, listed what all they've done, said it's a work in progress, give us time till 2022 and we will deliver. So to me it was essentially a political message listing out all the achievements and at the same time setting out a conciliatory tone, because remember, this is a government which has always come across as fairly martial, particularly as far as the vis-a-vis the minorities. The majority martial voice was coming through very strongly with this government. So I think there was definitely an attempt to approach it in a much more conciliatory tone, to say that yes, give us time, we will do all this. At the same time, we will not tolerate violence in the name of faith. As far as J&K is concerned also, we want to do it in the spirit of brotherhood, etc., etc. So for me, it was laying the pitch really for the 2019 election.
All right, laying the pitch for 2019 elections, keeping 2022 in mind as far as Vision India is concerned, and that's a new India that the Prime Minister has spoken about. I think each one of us needs to contribute to making that new India. But on that note, Maithili Bisnurmat, Kiran Majumdar Shah, R.C. Bhargav and Shobhana Kamineni, thanks very, very much for keeping your date with ET Now and discussing and debating India at 70.
Thanks for watching this special telecast. News and updates continue on your favorite business news channel, ET Now. Have a good day.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/ETNow.